But now I want to move on to what sort of the main point of this podcast is, and I just want to talk further about some of the articles that I have written and want to make more points and elaborate on things and expand on what I've already talked about. First of all, I want to go back to Christmas Eve and my review of Jesus, and I just wanted to talk more on that because, why not? I said most of what I wanted to say, but there were a couple of big things that I did leave out, and I'm not entirely sure why. The big thing is that I didn't want to, at the time, sound like a really huge sort of conspiracy guy. I don't want to be that guy who is, mentioning this, but it has to be said, I think, at some point, is that the similarities between Jesus and Death Grips 2012 release No Love Deep Web, I think I need to just sort of say it, because at the time I did mention the fact that Death Grips was coming through and being more successful at the time of the release of Jesus, but I didn't explicitly mention No Love Deep Web, and I think you do need to, we do need to sort of be honest with ourselves here and think that perhaps maybe, somebody went up to Kanye and he was like, oh, have you heard of this new band, The Death Grips? And Kanye sort of scratches his chin and he goes and he listens to the first track of No Love Deep Web, Come Up and Get Me, and he goes, oh, okay, so this is what everyone's listening to now, and he just goes and he gets Daft Punk on the phone, and he's, okay, so I don't really think it happened like that, but you can't deny that, I think he is, in a sense, pulling out his best Death Grips impression. I mean, considering the fact that he's decided to yell on quite a few of the tracks, I mean, that isn't something that he's just thought of himself. I really don't think that. I think that, he's got to this, he's heard this MC Ride fella, and he's just, decided that yelling is the next big thing. But I don't think that, there's got to be a little bit of substance to your yelling, in my opinion. And the other thing I wanted to mention was what I touched on quite briefly in the post, was that I think that it's important to remember that just because something is experimental and something is noisy doesn't necessarily mean that it's kind of really deep or on a different level. I think that it's important to keep your own tastes in mind still when listening to experimental music, because not all of it's great. It is an experiment, and people do get experiments wrong. People try things and don't get them right, and I think that that's the number one thing about experimental music. There are a couple of things on Jesus that he tries and it just doesn't work. There are just a couple of noises in there that I just found really annoying, and he is definitely trying to copy that sort of loud industrial hip-hop style, and he's given it a go, and he sort of really challenged his own audience, who are used to a sort of a more popular spectrum of music in general, and I think that that's important to remember too. So those are the two big things. A couple of the other small things is that I just wanted to say again that I thought Bound To was really, really good. I'm just so surprised, because it really did bring out a different level in Kanye, and it's a shame that he's decided to sort of go down this experimental route. Hopefully that's not really what he means when he's rapping about it in Bound To. I think that it's his best sort of style. He comes out with his best lines, and he comes out with the best sort of general feel of a track. So that's something that I wanted to say, and a couple of other small things where I just really didn't mention in the blog post was that I thought some of the lines were really bad, especially on I'm In It. I just didn't even mention that track at all, and I don't know why. I just feel like on the blog I just don't like to trash things too much. I'm a little bit more open to doing that here. I just thought that I'm In It just, it was kind of disgusting. I don't know, I got a lot of mental images of Kanye that I'm just not really gonna get out. Also, Chief Keef on Hold My Liquor, that was kind of a painful experience. I didn't really want to hear that. So that's the only other thing I wanted to say about Jesus. So that's all I have to say about that. The next one I wanted to go on to was Because the Internet by Childish Gambino, and I think that I said most of what I wanted to say in the review. However, there's a couple of things I just wanted to talk about more. The big thing is I think that Donald Glover, just as a person, he strikes me as a little bit too serious. I think on all of his projects he takes himself very seriously. And that's important, but I did find that some of the moments on this record where he was taking himself a little bit less seriously and he was, pulling out some of his sort of dad level jokes, I was really enjoying that. And the second half of the album is the biggest complaint that I had about it, and it is a little bit too serious. I'm not sure how I think he should remedy that. I just think that when he does let go and start delivering some really cheesy punchlines, I know some people don't like it, but I do, and I think that's where he's enjoying himself the most. I mean, you can't really have a whole album of self-loathing that's just sort of a little bit over the top. So the other thing I wanted to say is that I really do think that there is a place in music for sort of a critique of this internet age. I think that the few times he really did touch on the kind of the problems with the internet, I was really enjoying it. I wanted to hear more. The whole song World Star sort of really did bring out that idea that the internet makes us horrible people. I mean, the first thing that we do when we see a fight is we pull out our cell phone so we can record it and we can put it on social media, and in certain circles we're out there yelling World Star because we're so excited that we can put this on World Star Hip Hop and get lots of views for it. I think that's a really interesting point, and he really doesn't spend a lot of the album delivering interesting points like that. That's one of the really few occasions where I think he's made a really sort of nuanced argument as to why the internet's really messing us up. And that's my other big thing about Because the Internet. Everything else I think I really did cover in the blog post, and that's an album that's really been interesting for me. It's really got me thinking, but maybe it didn't get me thinking as much as I really wanted it to get me thinking. That's all for Because the Internet. I just wanted to move on to quickly talking about the Coldplay Ghost Stories review. I just wanted to add to what I had already said, that I kind of thought about the album as that in tone it was sort of very one note in terms of like the emotions that he was kind of putting across. I think that even though it is a breakup album, I think there are definitely a lot more emotions that you go through in that type of stage than just like pure hopelessness or dread or things like that. I think it was just kind of going over that one emotion over and over again, and I think that he maybe could have sort of covered more bases in that, but there's more time to come, and I think that there'll be more things that he'll want to talk about eventually as time goes on. But towards the end I was beginning to be like, oh Chris, man, you just need to talk to somebody about this. I don't know if you should be sharing it with me. I kind of felt like I was intruding on some very sort of dark places. I mean, and not in that kind of good way at all. I was feeling a little bit uncomfortable, I guess. That's all for that particular album. And finally, I wanted to go back to the very first review, which was Evergreen by Broods. And I think that looking at it, it's a lot different from the things that I have come out with recently, and that I think this reads a little bit more like a book report or an essay that I would have done at high school. And I think that I've moved on from that, and I think the reason that I did that kind of thing initially is that I just wanted to kind of put forward something that was not too offensive, if that makes sense. I guess I really just wanted to kind of put something forward, show what my style was, and talk about something and not like make too many enemies in the first blog post. I definitely didn't dwell too much on the negative. I tried to keep it quite balanced, and I sort of didn't want to play up the whole Lorde comparison for whatever reason that was, but I would definitely say is that when the lead singer, she starts singing in that very low register on tracks like Superstar, she definitely does sound a lot like Lorde. I have been confused a couple of times by that in the past, and I just think that she would just do well to sort of stay away from that sort of range, just because I think her voice is just so much better when it's not sounding like that. So That's was my main sort of addendum to this review. The other thing that I was going to add is that I think that just a little bit of maturity is going to do the band wonders, because I think even though that they've got quite a solid base with the sound that they've got going, I think that that's quite nice. I like it just as much, maybe more than the one that Lorde has going. Similar producers, similar sounds, but I just like their sound a little bit more. But despite this, there are still places where the lyrics are a little bit hammy, kind of very well worn sort of rhyming patterns, I would say, and sort of songs that just don't carry to the end. Like, you don't really feel like you want to listen to them to the end. I felt like there were a couple of tracks that were just a little bit redundant in that collection, but there were still some really good ones, and I just think once they sort of start to tweak those things, you're going to get a really good follow-up effort, and I really hope that one does come from them, because I think it's worth seeing where they're going to go from here. Just the way I think that it's going to be interesting to see the way that Lorde, who's much bigger, she's a much bigger artist than they are, how she's going to go and follow that up. Though that is also another interesting sort of prospect. So I'm very cautiously optimistic at the way these guys are going. So that's it for Broods. And just to close up, as you know, there is a review coming tomorrow, hopefully. And most of you have probably guessed, because I did put that on Facebook and I said, I guess it was quite easy. It was Nothing Was the Same by Drake. And so we'll see how that goes. I still don't know what I'm going to write as I record this, and it is 2:00 on Tuesday, so I will have to have something for you by tomorrow. And I still don't really know what I'm going to say. I just, there's a lot of things that I like, and there's a lot of things that I don't like, and it's difficult for me to say where I'm coming from, because I really don't know how I feel still, even this late into it. But you'll see it come tomorrow, hopefully, and if you don't, then, well, you'll know that I still don't know what I think about it. But I would say be prepared for me to perhaps say something that you don't like. But we'll see. That also leads me on to something that I was just going to throw out there, is that recently I have heard an album or two from quite popular artists that I just kind of have listened to and just straight away haven't liked. And so I don't know whether it's worth throwing out a review there about them, because I just don't like them, and there's a lot of reasons why I don't like them. And so I just feel like it's not really worth your time coming here and just seeing me say how much I don't like it. And, the album in question is, I'm not going to say, but it's a certain British singer-songwriter whose first album I really liked, but unfortunately he's come up with quite a bland and, processed effort, I guess, and I'm not particularly happy with that, because I had a little bit of faith. So that's all I'm going to say, but I don't know if that's something you really want to hear from me, is me sort of just ragging on an album for, a good few paragraphs. So unless you want to see something like that, let me know. But otherwise, I really don't think it's worth your time, and I think it's just gonna, hurt people's feelings, because, lots of people do like this stuff, and I can understand why, but I don't, and, there's no point in me just going on and on and on and on about it like I am right now. So that's pretty much everything that I wanted to go through on the podcast for now. I've really enjoyed doing this, so don't be surprised if you see me switching completely to just doing podcasts. I mean, I like writing, but this is also quite cool. Also, though, I would like to repeat that I would be very keen to have other people to come on the podcast, either in real life or through Skype or whatever, so please don't hesitate to, let me know about your interest in joining on this, because as much fun as it is just me talking to myself, I think that I do look awfully lonely just wobbling on like this endlessly. So it would be good to get a sort of dialogue going between people who have different opinions. So that would sort of add another dimension to this, I think. So once again, don't hesitate, because I think it'll be a lot of fun, as it has been right now, even just me doing this on my lonesome. So thanks for listening. If you've listened this far, thank you very much for listening this far. So, and hopefully I'll see you very soon with something else new to say.